Hi, Ben Carpenter here. I talk about the importance of calories a lot. Things like how to determine how many calories you need, how to manipulate calorie requirements or macronutrient ratios, etc, etc. And this is all very, very well and good, but it is directed at a kind of advanced end of the market, a very, very small percentage of people, because the majority of people don't want to count calories. If you think of most popular diet schemes, they don't involve counting calories. This is a very, very small percentage of people. If you think of things like Weight Watchers or Slimming World or the Special K diet or Cambridge diet or whatever, they will essentially control caloric intake without you having to monitor caloric intake. So you need to give people the most basic diet advice they can follow and actually adhere to. If you make it too complicated too quickly, you can put someone off and they won't be able to stick with it. So this video is going to be a very, very basic video on how you can lose weight without counting calories. You can also apply it to gaining weight, just reverse everything that I say. So, first things first, just because you're not counting calories doesn't mean that they're not important. Calories are important. A lot of people get confused because their specific diet doesn't revolve around calorie counting. They assume that calories don't matter. This isn't the case. All diets, or all successful diets, will be based around calorie control. End of. So, this is total body weight only, gaining weight or losing weight. It becomes a little bit more complicated if you're trying to gain muscle tissue at the same time as losing fat, i.e. known as recomposition or recomping. This is total body weight only, to make it simple. So, here's what you do. I would like you to imagine a seesaw. We'll call this a calorie seesaw. So, here's our seesaw. You're going to put everything that you eat on one end of the seesaw. All calories you consume, food, drink, whatever, goes on here. All calories you burn goes here. So this can be exercise sessions, it can be walking the dog, it can be walking to work, anything that's burning calories will go on this side. So what you need to do is tip the scales in your favour. So if you want to lose weight, we can either burn more calories, adding exercise sessions, burning more calories per unit of time, doing little things like walking the dog or increasing daily activity that way, which will tip the seesaw in this favour. The alternative is to lighten this side by consuming fewer calories, which again will tip this in your favour. So the goal is to tip the calorie seesaw towards a caloric deficit. So how do you do it? I'm going to focus specifically on food intake to try and keep this video as concise as possible. So you want to reduce the calories that you're consuming. How do you do this? So I'm going to give you two very, very simple examples. You can decrease the total amount of food that you eat on your current diet. So if you imagine everything you eat over a week, lay it out on a table, fill the table. If you remove some of those items, you will be eating almost like your diet is remaining the same, but you're just removing specifics. That will reduce the number of calories you're eating. So essentially food omission, you're omitting it from your diet. Now the alternative is food substitution. So for example, if you eat a muffin at your desk at work and you substitute that for an apple, that will likely be a caloric reduction. If you're going out at the weekend and you're drinking loads of beer and you swap that for vodka, that will likely again be a calorie reduction. So you have food omission or you have food swapping. Now, food omission is pretty easy. Most people kind of understand this, but they don't necessarily understand how they would implement it. So for example, let's say you had 4 meals per day. If you cut all of those down by 25%, removing 25% of each portion of whatever's on your plate, you'll reduce your caloric intake by 25%. Applying this to drinks and whatever before people try and nitpick me. So you can reduce your portion size but keeping all the food selection the same. Or what you can do is if someone's eating say 5 meals a day or 4 meals a day, you can get rid of one meal completely, which some people tend to find that they adhere to quite well. So this is things like intermittent fasting, when they might miss a few hours worth of eating and then keep their dinner the same, or stuff like that. So you need to pick what you think is going to be easiest for you to stick to, because if you can't stick to a diet, what's the point? There's no point having an amazing diet that you can't stick to, because you just can't be successful like that. So yeah, in terms of food omission, you can reduce portion sizes but keeping the food selection the same. You could get rid of meals completely. Now in terms of food substitution, I'm going to give you some examples. So I'll go from each food group. So let's say proteins, let's say meat, fish, etc., etc. If you went from red meat to an equal size portion of white meat, that will involve a calorie reduction because white meat is lower in fat than red meat. Same with fish. If you had an oily fish, something like salmon, and you substituted this for a white fish like cod, if the portion sizes are the same, you will still reduce your caloric intake because they're both lower in fat. So basically, oily fish, you can transition to white fish. Red meat, you can transition to white meat. In terms of starches, at the kind of higher end of the spectrum, things like spaghetti and pasta, you could transition to things like potatoes, which are lower in calories, lower in carbohydrates per the same 100 grams or per unit of weight. Potatoes, which also have the benefit of being more satiating, boiled potatoes and plain. I can link a video to that. I've got one on the satiety index. From potatoes, you can go things like butternut squash, which again, for the same unit of weight, is lower in calories, which if you then take towards the much lower starch end, things like vegetables. So green leafy veg, tomatoes, things like this, very, very low calorie options. So over time, you can transition these foods depending on your rate of weight loss. So in terms of implementation, this is what you would do. You need to weigh yourself regularly or have some kind of measurement to know whether you're on track or not. If someone weighs themselves once a month, if they haven't lost weight, why did you wait a month to find out? Now, the idea of weighing yourself regularly puts some people off, but what you often find is that instead of freaking out about the scales, if you weigh yourself on a daily basis, some people actually find that they freak out less because they start noticing weight fluctuations and therefore they care less about it because they understand it more. Whereas people that weigh themselves sporadically are essentially building up loads of anxiety, jumping on scales and then freaking out. So let's use an example, myself. If I weigh myself daily, it will fluctuate on a day-to-day basis, but over time, if the trend is going down, your question is, are you losing weight or gaining weight fast enough? If not, you need to tip the scales further in your favour. So to start off with, I might do things like I would swap, let's say if I have steak a couple of times a week, if I swap that towards chicken, that would reduce my calorie intake over the course of a week. It's unlikely for that to tally up to enough for me to lose weight at the rate that I want. So although it is tipping the scales in my favour, it's tipping it too small for my desired rate of weight loss. So what I might do is, let's say I have a portion of pasta or spaghetti in the evening. I would probably swap that and move it to something like potatoes or rice, and again reduce my caloric intake. Now, if it starts tipping further in my favour and I'm losing weight at the desired rate, perfect. If not, I might go one further. So things like rice portions, some of them, you don't have to do all of them at once. Some of them I might transition to vegetables, much lower calorie vegetables, green leafy veg, etc., which again would tip them further in my favour. So basically, it's essentially trial and error. You will adjust things, and if you start losing weight at the right speed, you keep them as they are until that changes. If you're not losing weight at the desired speed, you have to tip things further in your favour. But what this does is it allows you to implement trial and error. The other good thing about this is it means that people tend to adjust their diet bit by bit. Now, if your diet is one thing and then someone tells you to eat completely differently, a lot of people are going to find this hard to adhere to. But if you make small changes in your diet, one piece at a time, you will often find that because these are smaller changes, they are easier to stick to. Now, on a side note, if you want to take this a little bit further and you want to be able to do this more accurately, there's a kind of middle ground. It doesn't have to be no calorie counting or religious, meticulous calorie counting. You can loosely calorie count. So as an example, you might take an hour, use a website like MyFitnessPal, and you might get some approximate caloric intakes of each of your main meals. So my breakfast might be, say, 800 calories, my lunch might be 1,000 calories, or whatever. But if over the course of the week you know roughly how many calories each of your meals are, it enables you to make swaps. So for example, if my lunch is 1,000 calories and I go out to eat for lunch and something on the menu is 600 calories, I know that I can eat that and I'm going to still be in a calorie reduction from where I was before. So loosely counting calories or having a kind of beginner knowledge of counting calories can help if you want to find some kind of middle ground. A middle ground is a really good idea for a lot of people because most people's calorie knowledge is so poor that they don't really know what they're doing. So if you've got a degree of caloric awareness, it can help you in the long run make more educated decisions. But you need to pick that at a level that suits you, because if you tell someone they need to count everything, they need to weigh everything, they need to track everything, if that's not their psychology, you've essentially just ruined their diet because you're trying to get them to do something that they don't want to do. So, cliff notes. Pick the diet approach that works for you. So it might be reducing your portion sizes, it might be omitting portions, it might be omitting things like drinks at a weekend or particular, say, cheat meals, or you might implement food substitutions, or you might do a combination of both. But think about things you can do with your diet that are easy enough to maintain. And then measure yourself, things like waist measurements or weight or suit size or belt size or dress size or whatever you need, and do it frequently enough to understand whether you're doing it at the desired rate of progress. If you do it too infrequently, you can find that you don't know what you're doing, and then you weigh yourself a month later and you realise you've wasted a month. Whereas people that do it more regularly will understand that they need to do changes quicker. So for me, it's in 7-day cycles. If I haven't lost weight at the end of the week, I know I need to change things, rather than waiting 30 days to find out. So that's it. I hope it's been helpful. If you've got any questions, please feel free to ask. My Facebook page is facebook.com/Ben Carpenter's Personal Training. My Twitter and Instagram pages both BDC Carpenter. And thanks for watching. Bye.